let's do this. A lot of stuff going on. We've had him on the program before. Byron Henry is a constitutional expert. But Byron, with the news that has come out in the last 10 minutes out of Washington, what a perfect day to have you on. Byron, welcome to the Pat Miller program. Hi.
Great to be with you, Pat.
So the word is twofold from what we're hearing from the office of the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. That is that the president is, in fact, going to sign this bill as is, and then he will then turn around and declare a national emergency so that he can then go ahead and get other funds and build the wall. Is all of this going to happen? What's your take? Do you think this was the right way to go?
Well, I mean, right way to go is relative, of course, but I do think that there are a number of avenues for President Trump to gain more funds, national emergency being one of them, and it looks like his advisors have decided both legally and structurally the best way to get the funds, the quickest and safest way, the additional funds, is to do the national emergency, which presidents have broad discretion to declare. And, courts are not anxious or looking to second guess presidents when it comes to issues of discretion, such as what is and is not a national emergency, especially when presidents have exponentially more information to review and people to talk to about whether it's necessary than courts do. So it will not be an easy task to convince a court. Maybe you can convince one judge, but an appellate court or a Supreme Court that President Trump is wrong when something may or may not be a national emergency, whether you talk about sex trafficking or human trafficking or drugs coming through the border or criminals coming through the border or disease or sickness coming through the border, whatever. I mean, he's got a lot on his list, and courts would have to go through it, basically say, we know you think it's an emergency, President Trump, but we don't as a court. And that's not an easy task for any plaintiff that would try to block this move.
So if the courts don't try to stop him, I mean, that's a very good thing. Let me ask you another thing. Is there anything in you that would be worried about a precedent that might be set? Because if the president says, hey, these migrants, these caravans, we've got one that has just come to our border in the last several weeks. There are two or more on the way. There will be more to follow. He declares this a national emergency. If we get a President Kamala Harris or somebody else in 4 years or 8 years, what would prevent them from declaring, I don't know, climate change is now a national emergency, and so they begin to take billions of dollars and put it toward, Green New Deal initiatives so we can take care of climate change? I mean, isn't the precedent something to be worried about here?
Absolutely. I mean, the branches are always warring with one another for power, and in this case, the executive does a power grab, even if it's arguably within its discretion, pushing the limits of discretion. You always worry about separation of powers, which I both believe in and worry about, regardless of which party is in the presidency. I don't care if it's President Obama signing executive orders that basically do change immigration laws that I believe require an act of Congress, or President Trump declaring a national emergency and taking money when I believe most of the time you need congressional appropriation for funds, and I think that's a very good protection in the Constitution. The problem here, I think, is Congress's inability or unwillingness to act, and they've taken a back seat to the presidency because it's politically expedient to let someone else take the hit or to do the stuff, the things that it's their job to do. So Congress doesn't act, and what would happen here is if bipartisan way, Democrats and Republicans should get together and say, we didn't appropriate this money, we're going to pass a bill or pass a resolution or whatever saying we don't want the president spending money on a wall unless we say so. The Congress can get together and do that to protect Congress, not to get at President Trump, not to thwart national security, but to protect the institution of Congress and their ability to appropriate funds. The problem is Congress all the time sends funds to the presidency and administrative agencies, no strings attached to with discretion, and lets them spend at will. Now that it's President Trump, the left is going to be all up in arms that presidents can't do this. Well, they've been doing it. Both parties have been doing it for decades.
Yeah, exactly right. You're down there in Frisco. You're down there in the Dallas area. And so you're much closer to the border than we are. Your senator came up with a curious suggestion last night, Ted Cruz. He said, look, El Chapo now has been found guilty. We have the ability here maybe to confiscate his $14 billion that he got through selling drugs across our border and to our kids. Could we attach that $14 billion and use part of that for wall money?
Of course. I mean, if the federal government gets a hold of the money, then the federal government can spend it how it sees fit, as long as it's appropriate under current regulations or the law. I mean, it's $14 billion. All President Trump needs is another 3.5. That's 25% of El Chapo's ill-gotten gains for breaching our border. And so attach all $14 billion for border security, and you can use 25% of it for actual fence building or barrier building, and then use the other 75% for helping victims and all sorts of other things, Border Patrol, ICE, however you want to use it, and then save the federal government some money. It can be used for that. It's a good idea. It's a novel idea, and it has obviously some appeal because it's actually an individual who made his money violating the border.
Exactly.
Sovereignty of the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, the president, when he's campaigning for 2020, he could say, I said Mexico would build the wall. I actually meant a Mexican would pay to build the wall. So
that has a ring to it. I can actually hear the president saying that on the campaign trail.
Yeah, I can see the ads now. Byron, one last thing, and I'm asking because I'm not sure if you've had a chance to peruse any of the 1,169 pages of the bill, and if you did, you're far smarter than I am. I've heard a couple of things. I've heard that buried in there were a couple of poison pills. One of them, that there was actually something written into the law that would not allow the president to go grab money from elsewhere to use for wall spending. And also I've heard that there's some caveat in there that mayors of cities near the border could prevent the wall from being built next to their city. Have you heard any of this?
I have. I've also heard that there's some provision I haven't read it, but I've also read reports that there is a provision that would allow exclusion from deportation of persons accompanied by minors, which means you basically get a free pass if you can bring a child with you, whether it's yours or not. And I think that's a bad idea, of course. I do have I don't think Congress can delegate to a locally elected mayor the ability to thwart the president spending funds near the border on border security. So I think that may be more form than function, or just something to tie it up in the courts. And because there may be something in the bill to the part about there being a restriction on him using additional funds other than what's in this bill for the wall, and that may be why he's moving towards the national emergency, because instead of going and finding other funds within his own discretion and moving them, as I think you've probably heard discussion over the last week, that he'd find them from other sources, maybe this bill might block using other sources, other accounts, discretionary accounts. So he has to go the national emergency route. That may be part of the reason for that recent decision.
Well, I tell you what, and no slam to your profession. I have a huge appreciation for attorneys and lawyers, and I know that you're one that's held in very high regard down there in Texas. You've been recognized as a Texas rising star, and that's no small thing. I used to live in Houston, so I know what that means. But there could be a lot of opportunity here for a lot of legal work coming up as people start challenging law. You might find yourself back before the Supreme Court again.
Maybe, and you've probably heard that a couple legislators in Texas passed a bill to use part of Texas's rainy day fund, which is basically Texas's savings account, to fund the remainder of the wall.
Wow.
Funding. So I don't know where that's going, but there's, President Trump has some friends down here that would like to help him secure the border, and maybe even do more than just talk about it, but maybe put their money where their mouth is.
Byron, never a dull moment. I mean, little did we realize when we put Trump in, we knew it would be different. I'm not sure we knew it would be this different, but it's pretty amazing. Byron Henry, he is an attorney of very high regard down in the Dallas area, has been honored around his state and around the country, and he has, in fact, had some of his work make it all the way to the Supreme Court, so he knows the in and outs. You can find out more about him if you go to solidcounsel.com. Hey, Byron, I appreciate you being on before. I certainly appreciate you being on today, and don't be surprised if we don't come knocking on your door again when things just get just a little too legal for us.
Sounds Sounds great. It's my pleasure.
Byron, thank you very much. Have a great day. Byron Henry, and he is down there in Frisco, Texas, which is a beautiful area, by the way. But always glad to have him on. I'm always glad for the availability to reach out and grab some people that know a bit more than we do.